Welcome back everyone. I'm making this video as a response to someone who I've upset quite clearly. Now, a good friend of mine got back to me and told me that someone had made a response to my last video. So I was quite intrigued. I rushed back to have a look at it. And it was by none other than someone called the Muslim Cowboy.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, howdy y'all. It's good to see you guys again. Today we have another epic Christian fail. This guy's not as vehement and disgusting and vile as the last one that I did, but he makes some major blunders in his trying to determine how bad salvation is in Islam. So we'll talk about the mistakes he makes, go over his video, and talk about why what he's upon truly is nonsensical. Roll that intro.
Now immediately he frames this as he is the Muslim who is decent and able to have a conversation, talking to Christians of whom are not decent and cannot have a conversation. He then kind of has to backtrack a little bit and say, well, okay, this guy isn't that bad. Right, well, let's see exactly who is the person who resorts to insults and petty behavior throughout this video. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I think you need to maybe learn a little bit. And you're not as violent, virulent. So if you want to come talk to me, you can come talk to me. I'll explain to you, I'll teach you about Islam some, because I know you're very ignorant. And even though you're very emasculated, look like you eat a lot of soy products, it's okay. I will still take the time for you, just as long as you're not super effeminate when we have that one-on-one. I know a lot of things terrify you. I can tell by all that soy products hanging out around this thing you call your face.
We're asking people to be on the lookout for a man who robbed a store. And I think we do have his description. Can we take that? Let's take his description. Okay, this is the guy they wanted people in Pennsylvania to be out on the lookout for. He's got a nose and some hair that goes like that, and he was wearing a hat at the time of this particular crime. He's got kind of a chin that comes down to almost a point.
The irony is that I can spend as much time as I want making a response to you. The best response really comes from yourself, because you've just demonstrated to everyone that you are unable to engage in an intellectual conversation because you don't actually believe in your own words, you don't believe in your own religion, which is ironic given that you also made this statement.
For us, faith is not like it is in Christianity. In Christianity, faith is about doubts. Faith is about not fully believing in something 100%. It's about, being really wishy-washy. Okay, but in Islam, our faith is determined, right, by a conviction in the heart, having 100% certainty. 99% certainty, disbeliever. You have to have 100% certainty.
You correctly underscored the fact that if you don't believe in Muhammad and you have any doubt in Muhammad, then you are not in the fold of Islam. So well done for recognizing that. But on the other hand, you also seem to have this weird idea that in order to demonstrate your absolute, concrete, totally masculine, non-soy boy belief in Islam, you have to do this by resorting to petty childish insults. Which is weird, because I would have thought someone who actually supposedly studies Islam would be able to give some good arguments, but apparently no, just general insults is the best that you've got. But thank you for setting the bar and the boundaries. Now, he's done a response video where he's saying this whole stuff about the Hajj got it totally out of proportion. Actually, it makes complete sense, and we just need to be a bit more open-minded.
So first of all, he's exaggerating this quite a bit more than it needs to be. And at the end of the day, the Saudi Arabian government has to put limits on things because there is a carrying capacity. They literally cannot carry more than a certain amount of millions of people because there's not enough hotels, there is not enough space for the people to walk. So yes, they determine how much they can carry, how many people can come, and then they put this all together based on these nations, and they don't pick poor nations over rich nations or anything like that. It's all done through the advisement of their Hajj committee, and they do the best that they can. Because at the end of the day, not every Muslim in the world can make Hajj, right? Because the Ummah has grown so big. And I think you'll probably talk about that soon.
I mean, yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Obviously, that's the reason why there is a limit on how many people can get into Mecca, because there just isn't the logistics to have too many people in at one point in time. So yeah, I completely agree with everything you've just said. All you've done is explained the reasons why what I said is true. So thank you for that. My critique of Hajj as part of your religion is based on the fact that it is obligatory for all Muslims to do this, even though, for the majority of Muslims, they cannot do this. That is my critique. In the video, I made it quite clear that obviously there are exceptions, and if you cannot do it for whatever reason, that Allah is most merciful and forgiving and will let you off the hook, so to speak. But for those who can do it, of which you would assume given is the majority, since it's an obligation, the majority don't do it. What that means is that there is a core central pillar of Islam that is not actually applicable to the majority of Muslims. That would mean that the majority of Muslims don't actually do Hajj and don't actually practice their religion properly. That is the main essence of the critique. Nothing to do with how there are special exceptions. Googling for 2 minutes tells you that there are special exceptions. That's not an issue. The issue is about the majority of the Muslim population that has simply never done it and will probably not do it. Want some proof of that? Let's look at some stats. Let's look at Pew Research Group. A recent Pew Research Center survey of Muslims around the world found that across the 39 countries and territories surveyed, a median of 9% say they have made the pilgrimage to Mecca. So that's an average of 9%. This is an obligation for Muslims, meaning all who can do Hajj should do Hajj. Pew Research study says actually only 9% have. Now, if you don't think that's a problem, fine. But to everyone else who's watching this, that kind of sounds like a bit of an issue. That's a core pillar of the Islamic belief. Let's break this down by countries and see how the average is reflected across different nations. So you have the Middle East, North Africa at 17% average, Sub-Sahara Africa at 13%, and then we start to go into 10% now with Southeast Asia at 8%, South Asia as a whole as 6%, Central Asia at 3%, and also the southern eastern of Europe at also 3%. There are parts of the world of which, on average, 3% of Muslims there actually bother to go on Hajj. Now, of course, some of those Muslims are not going to be able to go on Hajj, but I'm willing to bet the majority of the Muslims there probably could go on Hajj at some point in their lives, but are choosing not to do so. Now, keep in mind, if you want to downplay this, you can do that as much as you want, but given it's a central pillar of your religion, I probably wouldn't go down that route. But hey, maybe Salah and Zakat, maybe they're all not really that important either. Who knows? An interesting point here is out of every nation that was polled in terms of how many Muslims they have from that nation that actually have done the Hajj, not a single one has more than 50%. Every single one of those nations that was polled gave a percentile that was less than 50%, with some of the lowest being 3%. What can we conclude from this? The majority of Muslims around the world don't do Hajj and have not done Hajj. We actually can break it down further than that based on this data. We can actually see that places like Lebanon and Egypt that are closer to Mecca actually have higher rates of people making the Hajj, whereas the further you go out, maybe Morocco or Tunisia, you start to see much heavier decline. In other words, the further you are away from the Hajj, the less likely a devout Muslim is to actually go on Hajj. And the Muslim cowboy's perspective here is, so what? Why does it matter? Fine, if that's the perspective you want to take. You didn't disagree with any of the things I was saying from a factual point of view. You only disagreed with the conclusions I drew. The conclusions that I derive from this data are very simple. Namely that the obligation that Allah has on Muslims is not one that is a fair obligation. Namely because the majority of Muslims do not meet the obligation and hence do not complete the 5 pillars of Islam at any point in their life. Or at least the vast majority of them don't anyway. To bring this video to a close, I think it's clear that the Muslim cowboy has not been able to either keep composure or to give good arguments against the critiques that I have made against the Hajj. It's quite evident that the Hajj is something which is not rational, it is irrational, it is something that most Muslims cannot achieve, and therefore it is irrational to make it obligatory on Muslims to do Hajj. He made some small jabs about the Bible because we all know that when Muslims can't actually defend the Quran, they just go straight to the Bible. It's literally number 101 on how to do dawah. For us, our salvation is found solely in the person of Jesus Christ and what he did for us, and not what the Saudi Arabian government does for us.
But you know what's great about that is that, there's no evidence for that in the words of God or of Jesus. Wait, didn't in John 17:3 Jesus said that they may know you, the only, keyword, only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent? Doesn't sound like Salvation is through Jesus.
But let's address these real quick. Here are some verses on the screen where Jesus explicitly says that he is actually going to give his life for the world as a living sacrifice, or as a lamb. What he is doing is intentional and knowing, and that this will be for the benefit of many. That's a very easy to debunk thing. Then he goes to John 17:3. Now this is eternal life, that they may know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. Like most Muslims, they seem to get this Trinitarian verse completely wrong and think that one God equals one person. That's not what Christians believe. If this guy ever was a Christian, he should have known that. Apparently he didn't. Quite simply, the only true God is a reference to the fact that we only believe in one God. Hence there is only one true God. The Father is called that one true God, in the same way that Jesus in John chapter 20 verse 28 of that same book that you just quoted also said that Jesus is that one true God. What's interesting, of course, is they go to verse 3 and completely ignore the previous verse where Jesus says that he gives people eternal life, but obviously he has no issue with that as a Muslim, because apparently anyone can give eternal life, and that's not a divine statement. But as Christians, we understand the Old Testament correctly when it says that only God gives eternal life, Jesus gives eternal life, therefore Jesus is God. This isn't particularly difficult or brain science, but perhaps for this young gentleman, maybe it is. I would be more than happy, by the way, to set up a debate to discuss biblical topics, contrast them between Christianity and Islam, and have a live, public, open debate. Perhaps your muscular Islam can be put to the test. I have a funny feeling you won't though, but let's see if you get back to this message. And hopefully if they could share this with the Muslim Cowboy, so we can see that I've made this offer, and let's see what he says. I will have my fingers crossed though.